Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And so we immediately had to get really clear on what are we trying to do, and then what team do we need to accomplish that.
What really saves a company in crisis? We often think it's strategy, maybe money, or even technology. But what if the real answer is culture? In this episode of Sense Making Conversations, I'm joined by Aaron Vaccaro, president of Singularity Group. You might have known them as Singularity University, and they are a global leader in exponential technologies and future-focused leadership. Since stepping into the role in 2023, Aaron has led Singularity through one of its most significant transformations. Previously, Aaron served as vice president at West River Group, Singularity's lead investor, and held executive board roles with innovative companies like Topgolf and Tailspin. And he continues on with West River as an operating partner. But at Singularity, what many don't know is that just 2 years ago, they came within inches of collapse. Aaron stepped into a broken structure, an unclear vision, and a leadership vacuum at a moment when survival wasn't guaranteed. So how did they turn it around? That is exactly what we're going to explore in this episode. And make sure you listen to the very end, because Aaron's insights are deeply rooted all throughout this conversation, and the lessons that he provides can help each of us in our businesses and in our lives. Aaron's story is as real as it gets, and I think you're going to leave this conversation seeing possibilities with new eyes. I'm Andrea Sampson, and this is Sense Making Conversations. Welcome, Aaron. I'm so excited for our conversation today. You know, you and I have known each other for a little while, and I've been around Singularity University for many years, and I know you have as well. Many of our guests probably aren't as familiar. Can you tell us a little bit about Singularity and how you got involved?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fun to be here. And in particular, it's fun to be doing this with you because we got to know each other originally as you were actually coaching me on my own speaking and storytelling. And now I've gotten to put that to use for a couple of years. And there you go. And now it's like the final exam is back with the teacher. And yeah, we met through this place that we both love, which is Singularity University. Singularity University is basically I think of it as the first university where we teach people about the future, not about the past. And it was founded by a couple of futurists and entrepreneurs, Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis, in 2008, with the idea that traditional education was not preparing leaders for the future that is actually coming in the way that we need leaders to think. And so the idea was, instead of teaching them just the classics and history and math and those things, we're going to teach them about what we call exponential technologies, which are these technologies that are rapidly advancing and accelerating because of positive feedback loops, like artificial intelligence and biotech and quantum computing and big data, and also teach them about the big problems in the world, which we call the global grand challenges. And then finally, point them in the direction of starting companies and projects and initiatives using those exponential technologies applied to those big problems in the world to actually create solutions that oftentimes look like startups or sometimes look like nonprofits. But basically, we're taking advantage of what is happening in the world of accelerating technology to harness it for good, not just for profit or for evil. I think of like Peter Thiel at some point tweeted about, we wanted flying cars and we got 140 characters. It's kind of the same idea, right? Like Singularity exists to educate and to inspire leaders to harness exponential technologies to create breakthroughs to benefit humanity.
And it's such important work. In all of the years that I've been working with Singularity, the thing that always stands out to me is the quality of the people and the depth of their passion for what they do. And not just for what they do, but how what they do impacts everybody. And I think it's the thing that we could only have dreamed of even just 10 years ago. we need to pay attention to those global grand challenges to understand how the work we're doing, the new technologies that are being created are actually impacting. And I think that is what I admire most about SU and the work that it does. I mean, you are now the president. So you're the president of Singularity University, and you officially sort of stepped into that role in 2023, but you'd been around advising Singularity for many years previous. But when you stepped in 23, Singularity was struggling. It had gone through, of course, so many of us coming through 2020 and all that that did, and especially for those of us who work in the area of live events and speaking and influence through thought leadership. It's been difficult, and SU was not, it wasn't immune to that, let's just say. So tell us about what you stepped into and what you saw as you stepped into this role as president.
It is true. It was a tough few years there. And I came from, an investment firm where we're an investor in Singularity, but also in a number of companies that were experience based and catered to, large groups of people and live experiences. And it was a really tough market all the way around, obviously the pandemic. And so that had a big impact on Singularity, but there was also unique to Singularity circumstances as well. So the
Mhm.
combination of, systemic and unsystemic. Singularity had been through a period where pre-COVID, it had really scaled up. And so we got involved by investing in 2015 and then a much bigger investment in 2018, the purpose of which was to help scale up the company. And it had gone from 10, 20 million revenue to 30, 40, 50 million over 4 years. And along with that had scaled up to 200 plus people. And so if you look at the peak in 2019, had about 230 people plus all of our experts, faculty and contractors, and was doing about 50 million in revenue. And so it had prepared to grow to a much bigger scale and built the infrastructure for that. But then through, a combination of not achieving that growth that they expected, but then also the 1-2 punch of underperformance on sort of the scale. And then immediately after the pandemic coming through, it was like almost down for the count. And so I had worked with the company through the pandemic to try to help it survive, get to the other side. And we had scaled, way back to a size that had made sense kind of, but the business, was still losing money. So when I showed up, it was at a pace of around $7 million a year or so that was burning. And
That's significant.
yeah, and was a team of about 55, 50 to 60 people. And it was able to do that because there were investors that were continuing to write checks to keep floating it at that rate. And so when I came in, that was kind of the situation. And there was a senior leadership team and there was levels of the organization, and they were trying to kind of do all the things that the company had done before, maybe just at a smaller scale. And then we're trying a few new things, but really it was just like, well, we got to get back to the sort of quote unquote glory days, which is funny because at the peak of the glory days, the business burned something like 27 million
Wow.
of cash that year. So it's like, okay, was it really? But I think, the insight that I think you and I have shared at some point was like, there's a difference between believing abundance is possible and believing like abundance is already here, right?
Mhm.
It actually, the reality is you can't say yes to everything and, yes and in an actual capital constrained world where resources are like a real thing. And the business had kind of suffered from that abundance mindset in a way, right? And so I came in and tried to figure out basically, okay, what do we have? How do we take the team that we have here and get to a point where we're not burning money, but we're profitable? And that was a big, that was a big jump, losing
Mhm.
6-7 million. And this team, like the only way out of that either was to cut dramatically, which was not on my agenda, or to grow dramatically, grow our
Uh-huh.
way out of it with the team that we had. And so that's what we started trying to do. And then about 6 months in, there was a kind of a cataclysmic event that really made our decision for us, which was that those investors that had been floating the company all that time had their own crisis and they kind of disappeared. And so all of a sudden it was no longer an option to keep losing $7 million a year. It was like lose zero make it on your own or close up shop.
As you think about that, when we find ourselves in these places of financial shortfalls, and every company goes through it, it's not unique to anyone. There are up years, there are down years, there are up months, there are down months. But in reality, when we start digging into what is it that's causing it, of course, we can look out to the economy and say, well, tariffs are impacting us, or, the pandemic. And all of these things are true, but there is a yes and to it. And to your point, the abundance mindset, which I think is really fascinating, the thing that I take away from what you're saying is that when we think about abundance, sure, we're in a place of abundance, but we can't have everything at the same time. We can have it all, just not at the same time. There's a famous saying, right?
Well said,
And
yeah.
and I think that this is one of the things that people mistake with abundance is they think they can have everything at the same time. And we shouldn't. We're not ready for it. And if I think back to those days, we were there. We worked a lot with Singularity in 2019, and I got to know many of the leaders at that time. And there was a lot of that thinking going on. It was, it's all going to come and we're all good and we can do everything. And there was not a lot of ordering of effect. So if you look at that moment 4 or 5 years later, when you finally had that crisis where it's like, okay, there is no safety net anymore.
Mhm.
Is it just financial or is there something else driving that? Because I think it's easy to say it's financial. And of course, that's the thing that's screaming the loudest in the moment.
Mhm.
But what did you find when you looked under the covers?
Yeah. Well, it turns out, if surprise, surprise, it's not just financial. Because if you have all the other things right, like, Coach Lombardi wrote a book, The Score Takes Care of Itself. I think if the culture and the strategy and the vision and all those things had been in the place where they needed to be, then the financials may not have been such of an issue, right? I think one of the things we suffered from that was another casualty of the pandemic was on the leadership side. In 2020, we had a transition. Rob, who had been CEO for a long time and is still a dear friend, and I'm sure Rob. He finished his tour of duty and was like, I am ready to rest and go do something else. And absolutely, like, he served really hard for 10 years and did amazing things. I've, by the way, been really lucky to keep him as a friend and mentor as I've stepped into this role, because it's like
Yeah.
there's only a couple people who have done this before. And we brought in another leader to kind of step into his shoes. And between the time that guy signed his contract and then started his first day, the pandemic started. Like, it was January to
I
May
remember that. I
2020. It
do
was like,
remember
oh my
that.
gosh. So he not only like did the entire world change, and like what he signed up for was totally different from what he was handed. He also was coming from Singapore and he got stuck. He couldn't leave the country. And so was trying to run the company from across the world for a couple of years. And that was just like an impossible challenge. Trying to build a culture and set a vision and strategy and all these things. It was way too hard. And so I think, not really for lack of his effort, I stepped into a situation where there was a real vacuum of leadership, and in particular, no sort of cohesive vision. And I'll give you an example, a story that really illustrated this. So my first meeting where I had the leadership team together, at the time, it was, six, sort of the CMO, COO, VPs of finance and HR, and kind of the core leadership team. We got together in like a facilitated sort of planning session. And I said, okay, if in 5 years we are successful, what does Singularity look like? 5 years from now, if we achieve everything you think we should achieve and we really knock it out of the park, what does the company look like? And when I tell you those 5 different visions could not have possibly been more different, you have one
Mm,
person saying we're going to be a media company that's just like sharing ideas. One person saying we are a university with degree programs. We have one
wow.
person saying we're a network, a physical network of like innovation labs and hubs around the world. You have one person saying basically we're like McKinsey. And it's like, oh my gosh, you have the
Wow.
leaders of this company with equally great, but totally competing in different visions for what we are actually trying to do as a company, pulling in all different directions now every day. It's like, no wonder we're not getting anywhere. It's like the people leading the company are just rowing in completely different directions.
As the new leader coming in and suddenly you hear all of these different visions. You go home that night. What's that like for
It,
you?
it, it was revelatory. I mean, not just for me, but for, I think, everybody in the room, right? It
Yeah.
was a clear, like, oh, wow, no wonder this is so hard. Like, we don't have a single North Star that we're all rowing towards. Like, we're pulling in different directions, and we don't have the communication skills or the trust on this team to surface that for
Wow.
ourselves. And
Wow.
so that was like one of the really key sort of leadership insights and lessons that was crystallized for me in that time was the importance of setting a vision, right? Like a clear vision. If you do one thing as a leader, nothing else, like somebody has to be the person saying, this is where we're going. We are all going to get on the same page. And if you don't want to go there, then you can get off the boat and and we'll still be friends. And I think that's something I've learned from my mentor, Eric Anderson, who's, chairman of Singularity and CEO of our investment firm, West River. He's drafted into all these leadership positions. Like everything we invest in, everywhere we go, he's pulled in to be the chairman or the CEO or something. And it's not because he's the best manager in the world or he's like hands-on with the planning or the people or whatever. It's because he's a guy that will set the vision and say, this is where we should go. And people said, yes, I want to go there too. Right.
So what is the vision?
That was the next challenge, right? And right after this particular meeting where I realized the challenge that was ahead of us, both in building a team that trusted and collaborated with each other, but also creating a cohesive vision that we could all build towards, we ran into this place where we all of a sudden lost funding and then had to basically restructure the company. And the positive side of that was it's like never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And so we immediately had to get really clear on what are we trying to do and then what team do we need to accomplish that.
Right.
And so to fast forward to the outcome, it's like it's never a fun story to have to restructure and lose jobs and all those things. And it was the worst day of my career of like having to let so many friends go and make that tough decision. But the people made it really easy because I said to the board, I'm not doing this unless we can take care of everyone that is leaving in the right way. And secondly, we communicated really clearly, transparently of like what was happening. And our choices were either we can take a small group of us in a smaller boat and we can press on and try to continue the mission, or we can all turn back. And the overwhelming, of course, outcome was no, like we got to do this, or you guys have to do this. And the moments where I broke down and like, if there was a place where I cried the hardest as a leader having to go through that, it wasn't the moment of, I'm really sorry, this is what's happening. It was the moment of them saying back to me, like, just keep going, like you're doing the right thing. Just don't give up. It still makes me want to like tear up, right? Is when that's the reaction of people saying, hey, I'm really sorry, but we're losing all these jobs and you're going to have to go do something else.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Even though the vision itself, it sounds like, was unclear, the purpose was not unclear. And I think that's what's really powerful about Singularity and the work that you do is that it was always about creating a positive future. And the work that everyone was doing, regardless of how you were going to get there, that was the destination. Let's create a future that's better than the present that we have.
And it's
And
not about
and
it's not about me, and it's not about any individuals. It's bigger than us.
yeah.
And I think that's what everyone also feels, right? It's the mission and the purpose of Singularity. It's actually even bigger. It's bigger than Singularity. We just have
Yes.
the privilege. We have the privilege of being the brand that sort of represents this idea, this future, and this mindset. And we get to steward that. And then we as people have our privilege of getting to lead this company and this brand that represents that mindset. But Singularity could go away tomorrow. And this mindset and this optimism, really, that we're the manifestation of, is still going to exist in the world.
Yeah. So here we are. The company has faced its dark night of the soul, right? It really has. And people have had to leave, and vision had to be clarified and better understood. And
Mhm.
what did you do? How did you take this smaller group? This reminds me of the concept of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, right? Like
Mhm.
either we all summit or we get a smaller group to the top. And the choice there was we're going to get you guys to the top. And so
Right.
there you found yourself with a huge responsibility. You're taking the hopes and dreams of those who had to go along with you. What happened? What was the vision that you created? And how did you get people from this place of we've just lost our friends and family, and we've got to go on by ourselves, and we've got a huge responsibility.
Well, that responsibility was really motivating. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We all felt it. And, and there's a lot of survivor's guilt, in that kind of situation. Every team had gone from a bunch of people to a couple, and there's nobody that didn't lose somebody that they loved working with or was
Yeah.
important. But it was an opportunity to say, look, we got to get really clear really fast on what we are doing. And the week after that went down, I brought the remaining team all together in person. And there was, I think, like 15 of us left,
Wow. So
you know,
from 200 people, you had already
to
gone down like
to
to down
50,
to 50 and
55.
then
Yeah.
15.
Yeah. Then we're about
Wow.
15, maybe a couple of
Th-
contractors. We 18 people. So,
wow.
and it was
That must
weird.
have been a sobering moment when you look around the room and
Oh
see
man,
that few people.
it was weird. And the juxtaposition was, so we had planned this company offsite for 55 people. And then this happened. And then it was like, well, we're still going to we paid for it. And like, but now more than ever, we need to get together as a team and strategize and bond. And we got together, and it was just really just put right in front of us what we'd just been through, because we're sitting in this giant room for 55 people with only 15 huddled right in the middle. And we're looking around going, well, it's just echoing at us that,
This is
where
who
we
we
came
are
from.
now.
And it was a combination of like grieving and then frantically planning, okay, how are we going to get through the end of the year? Like, we've got 3 months till Christmas. We've got to run a bunch of programs. We've got to sell out. We've got to do these things. And then we got to figure out the year and then next year. And so I'd say it comes down to, we said we are going to just focus on what we are the best in the world at. We know we can execute on brand and with super high quality, and we can do profitably and sustainably, which is teaching, right? Our executive program, our custom work with our clients that were just the repeat customers that we had coming back every year that we knew would be there and we knew we could do great programs with. And then, of course, and then Peter's program, Abundance, which is really successful. So it was like, we are in the business of educating and inspiring leaders, educating them about exponential technologies and inspiring them to create breakthroughs in their own organizations, starting companies, changing their community and shifting their mindset and expanding what they believe is possible, and understanding the fact that the technology is inevitable, but what we do with it is not. And that has great implications for how we show up as leaders in companies, how we build companies, lead organizations, and make choices every day. And so it came down to like, look, we know we can do a great executive program. We know we can work with our core group of clients that is loyal and is willing to come back each year. And then from there, like, we'll stabilize the business and then we'll decide where to grow from there. And that's what we did. And we were literally able to sell out the 2 programs that remained that year. We had the December of that. So this happened in September. December of that year, miraculously, was the biggest month we've ever had in the company history in terms of booking new enterprise business. So if you want to talk about divine intervention or something, it was like out of nowhere, we had $1 million of new clients that just showed up in December and signed with us.
Wow.
And then the things happened like, oh, by the way, you finally are going to magically get your, COVID like tax relief grant or something from 3 years prior. And it was like, here's $500,000 that just shows up from the government out of nowhere. It's like these things that came together allowed us to survive. And the team really banded together of like, we know what we're doing. We're going to do amazing programs. We're not going to try to do all this other stuff of like, we're not going to try to do labs and build startups and do prizes and do like consulting and building things. We are going to bring together our faculty and experts to design great programs and educate and inspire leaders. And now that's what we've been doing. And it's a challenge with a brand like Singularity that touches all these different aspects of super interesting and fun technology and startups and all these things. There's a lot of shiny objects.
Yeah.
And you have to maintain the discipline of saying, no, we got to focus on the core mission.
I mean, there's so many questions that I sort of swirling around. I mean, you've skinnied down this team, which I can only imagine how hard it was to decide who stayed. It's not like you had a huge team of poor performers. How do you go about that? Another
Yep.
question that I've got as well is, have you landed on one clear path and mission?
Mm.
Has that solidified? I mean, you had this moment where suddenly you realize that your leadership team is going in different directions. And then from that moment, you suddenly have this crisis that comes in that says, okay, well, great, but except now you don't have any money to go forward. But that was a big interrupter. At what point, or have you come back to that question of what is that vision? What is
Yeah.
it that you are now all rowing towards, or are you still working on that?
What I'm learning, you do have to return to it all the time.
Yeah.
Because if you don't keep that front and center, then it's easy to drift and people get their own, even if you have a clear vision statement or
Yeah.
mission that you think people understand, everyone's got their own interpretation of it, right?
Yes.
Like it all means something a little different to each of us. And in particular, with a very mission driven company like Singularity, people, one, feel really strongly about that and feel a
Mhm.
strong sense of identity in it. Um, but also interpret it in a way that means something to them. And so I can tell you on my team now, I have people who the powerful and most inspirational part of the mission that they are drawn to and what they see for Singularity is the inspiration part, which is like, hey, we want to be teaching people about these crazy technologies that are happening and inventions and blowing their minds about what's possible in the future. It's the imagination part that's exciting. And I have other people on the same team who are looking at the same mission statement, and what they're getting from it is more about the educating leaders on the inevitability of technology and making wise decisions about how we use it and how we train models and the ethical implications in those things. And so it's like those are different things coming from the same statement, different interpretations. And they can both be part of the mission, but it's like you take either of those to an extreme. And the first one is like, are we just a sci-fi production company? And the other one is, are we a ethics think tank or a watchdog agency? But let me go back to the first question, which is how do you choose the team? Because this is a tough one. But I think if there's one thing I actually did well and don't want to say broke the mold a little bit, but kind of broke the mold, it was probably this. And it made all the difference in the world. If my dear friends who were affected by this listen to this, someday, this is the full story. And we've all talked about this. We're not going to be any surprises, but I'll tell you. So I've unfortunately have been through this a couple times with different companies, right? With Singularity actually as well in the past, they went through a couple of restructures that I had to advise on. And what normally happens when you have to restructure a company like this is the executive team gets together in a room and they say, okay, so we need to save $4 million of cost to make this thing profitable. So who are we going to let go? Like, obviously none of us, ha, 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 right?
Right.
So we gotta figure out all these other people that we somehow have to let go. But the truth of that is, one is the people in that room are by far the most expensive. You're
Absolutely.
talking about $500,000 a person plus versus like on the front lines, you've got people getting paid 80,000, but doing just as much work. And the other thing is that those people in that room are the ones who got us into the situation in the first place. And so what should happen, I think, is you look first at this room and say, okay, where do you start? But of course, if you have the executive team, they're the ones doing this, they're not going to do that to themselves. It's like
Right.
never happens. So what I did instead was not tell anybody this was happening. And I locked myself in the room and said, if I had to rebuild this company for the future, who are my draft picks, for future leaders on the team? And I ended up going basically down to the next level of not anyone who was on the C-level team and looking at basically a team of younger people in their, 30s and early 40s that one had leadership potential. I thought a lot of potential, but two, were actually doing everything. Like they were doing the real work of building and leading
Right.
the programs, doing the
Yep.
marketing, doing the operations, because we were going to a place where there was going to be no room for layers of management.
Yep.
There was only going to
Yep.
be player coaches, right? And so I basically made my initial three draft picks and ended up being four draft picks, brought them into the Kronos Trust, said, all right, guys, here's the situation. We are going to rebuild the company and you're my team. You each get to pick two or three people and that's going to be it.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it was went over basically the executive team. And so these people are now sitting here going, okay, my boss is going to lose their job. I'm going to be elevated in basically all battlefield promotions, right? And then I have to pick a couple of people that are going to work for me. In some cases had been peers or even more senior to this person and said, you're going to be my team now. And we're going to be the new marketing team, or we're going to be the operations team. So in the course of basically 2 weeks, they each picked their draft picks. We ended up with, 15 or 16 people, and put together the plan. And with that small team, we also said, okay, so if with these people and with these programs and these customers, what do we have? How do we build a model that from day one is actually profitable and we know we can execute?
As you were going through those couple of weeks with this small group of 4 draft picks, as you call them, no one knew, right?
Nobody
This
knew.
had to
So
be very.
they're
So
having to show up every day. It
how did
was totally cone of trust, absolute silence. Like,
how did you keep that from leaking?
it's easier in a remote world.
Right, of
So the whole
course.
company is remote. So
Yes.
I was actually, it's interesting. I was at the time in Seattle for the month of August, staying with a friend. My old college roommate was housing us because my wife was doing a rotation for med school up there. And so I was working out of this like little extra room at my old buddy's house, planning all this, the most stressful month of my life.
Wow. Holy
And
cow.
so we kept it basically at like, I had absolute trust in that team, and they knew they were totally dedicated. They were humble, and I selected for the qualities that I wanted on the team, right? Which is like dedication, humility, trust, fun, empathy. And it wasn't by design, but it also turned out that all of them were women. And so I have a whole team now of women leaders, which is awesome. And I think the other thing that I had heard, I'd always sort of believed, but I got to put it into practice, was that, men are judged, generally speaking, on their potential, and women are much more harshly judged basically on what they have already proven they
Yes.
can accomplish, not
Yeah.
on what their potential is.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing I'm proud of, is I looked at these 4 women and said, like, all of you guys, I think, have potential to be great leaders. Nobody's given you a shot yet, but I'm going to give us a shot. And I wouldn't even say it was like took the risk to do that, because it wasn't a risk at all. It was just great people that were going to crush it as leaders, but just hadn't stepped up to that point yet. And so they of course kept it all under wraps. We designed a great team. And then I had the job of going to the senior leadership team saying, hey, I'm really sorry, but the music is over. Music is stopping, and letting them all know. And then after that, of course, we let the whole company know and basically said,
Right.
this is the team that's going to go forward. We're going to carry on the vision. And if there's a chance if we make it and we grow and there's a chance to bring some of you back, we would love to do that. But first we got to fix this place and stop the leak in the boat. And then, yeah. And it turns out that leadership team is the same one that I have today, 2 years later.
Wow. Yeah, so you're 2 years into this, and like you said, that those first 3 months, you had some divine intervention. There were some
That's my
sobering
theory.
moments. Yeah, but when you look back now with the benefit of hindsight, what is it that you think was the key over the past 2 years? Would you say today that the decisions you made are right? With hindsight, what are the indicators for you along the way?
Mm-hmm. I certainly have not done everything right. I mean, man, I have made so many mistakes as a leader. It's my first time really in the seat as the leader in the kind of the top dog seat. And it's a challenge. It's a lonely place
Sure.
too. And I've learned so much. And I would not still be here if it wasn't for the overwhelming grace of the people that I'm leading, right? And their willingness to give me space to make mistakes in leading and figuring it out. And so I just like that has been a blessing. I think I definitely stand by the choices that we made in terms of people. I think it's pretty clear were the right ones, because now over 2 years later, and here's another crazy stat that I'm extremely proud of. We have not lost a single person
Wow.
that I did not choose to lose. So when you do a restructure, oftentimes what happens is after the fact, there's like a bunch of attrition because people say, oh, this is a sinking ship. I see the writing on the wall. And then they start leaving. And we have not had a single person quit in 2 years, except for one person who got the opportunity of a lifetime about, 3 or 4 months in. She got a chance to go be creative director for this amazing brand. And I couldn't even say no. It was like, hey, you got to go do it. This sounds awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you want to come back, I'm going to hold your job open for a month because I have a suspicion that you're going to miss us. And I kid you not, 3 weeks later, she called me and said, I want to come home. He's like, I don't care if the ship is on fire. It's my ship and I want to come back.
Wow.
And so we did have one. We had one little boomerang. But aside from that, yeah, not a single person has quit. Now, we have had to make some changes. But again, that was my choice in either changing our strategy or the position or turns out that that person was not the right, not the right person for the role. But nobody has said, oh, you know what, I don't want to be part of this team anymore, and chosen to leave. So the other thing I'd say in hindsight, I don't think, I don't know that I like think at the time it was the wrong decision, but I can tell you something that ended up being true in hindsight is I actually kept even more people than I needed to.
Hmm.
So there was a few people on that team that we kept in the boat that were sort of like what I call warehousing talent. And so it was like, okay, there may not be an immediate job for you right now on this new strategy, but you're somebody that I don't want to lose. And I think there may be an opportunity, 3 or 6 months from now, if we're successful, like there's something for you to do. And I want to sort of keep you as an option, keep you on the team. And I can think of, you know, three, 2, 3, 4 people that were sort of like that. I think that logic made sense, but I can tell you in practice what it turns out to be is like in a situation where it's all hands on deck, everywhere else, it's all hands on deck. People have a very clear job to be done, very clear responsibility, very clear, like, what do we need to do to survive? But then you have a few people who are sort of like, well, why am I here? And then like, I don't have that same urgency of like, my job is critical today to survive. It feels weird to them. There's like a sort of sense of like loss of purpose. And also for the team that is working their butts off and has a clear directive, they're sort of like, what is this guy doing over here? Or why is she here getting paid the same salary, but like clearly not doing the same thing I'm doing or working as hard or whatever. That takes a toll on culture and on that person. And in some cases, they can kind of go stir crazy and like, it's like, what am I doing here? And so I think in the situation that we were in, the even better decision would have been to say, like, everyone that is going to stay is on the boat is only here if they have a very clear job to be done, very clear goals, and need to execute the plan. And if there is a need for more talent in the future for a new initiative or something that we think they might want to do, we can always either go try to get that person back, or if we have to, we can go find new talent. But it's not worth the cultural and emotional toll and even financial toll it takes to just have them hang around.
How are you doing now? Is it successful? Have you turned the boat around?
Is it on the right track? Yeah. Well, I can tell you very proudly that, we made it through that initial end of the year 2023 with a fraction of, the resources that we were promised. And then we, now we're in middle of 2025 here. And I can say of 2024, we succeeded in not just achieving our initial goal, which was to be break even, but we ended up making about $3 million of profit for the year.
Wow. Congratulations.
So almost a $10 million swing from losing 7 to making almost 3. And for the first time in Singularity's history, being actually profitable. So
That's incredible.
we've been around for 17 years and this team, we finally did it. So I'm really proud of that. And I think, this year we're on track to repeat the same with a little bit of growth. And so, barring any going, big mistakes or going crazy, I think we're on a path that if we maintain discipline and don't get sucked in by the shiny objects and the abundance mindset and all that, we can keep our costs low and keep a super lean team that's disciplined and then grow without ever putting ourselves in a position where we're over our skis.
What I'm struck with in this entire conversation is this culture that we're talking about. And culture is one of those things that is so downplayed in organizations. And yet, it is the defining difference between a successful organization and an unsuccessful organization.
Yeah.
And every piece of what you've shared in this turnaround story has been to look internally first, to understand the driving factors that will create or inhibit success and to focus on those. I mean, at any point during all of this, did you know you were rebuilding culture
Mm.
as well as a company?
Yeah. I mean, culture is one of those things where it's easy to talk about and it's really hard to build. And it's because to actually do it requires making tough decisions because
Mhm.
you have to recognize like there are people or activities or attitudes that are negatively impacting culture. And you're not going to fix that by team building activities and ice cream socials and gift cards and things. Those are like band-aids for culture when oftentimes what you have is a cancer that has to be dug out.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so the way that you actually fix the body isn't by putting band-aids all over it. It's by doing the really hard work of saying, no, this isn't going to change unless you get out the root cause, right? And so that was when we had the opportunity to rebuild the team basically from scratch. It was like start with me and then build from there. We selected, really hard for culture. And what does that mean? It's like ego is a big one.
Mhm.
Singularity has the benefit of being an organization that attracts brilliant people. Always has, right? I mean, you
Mhm.
saw
Yeah.
amazing, talented, big ideas, really, really smart. But the downside of that is you also attract a lot of people who know they're really smart and think they have great ideas. And you have a lot of ego. And you have to be careful with that, right? Like too much ego, especially if it's not with clear direction and vision, all the things, it starts pulling in all these different directions. And people think that they can treat other people badly. And that's just something that I don't stand for.
Well, and it's the thing, again, having been involved with SU since I think I first got involved in 2017. And what I have always admired about Singularity as an organization was its deep commitment to societal change and creating a future. But what had been, and certainly I witnessed through the time that I spent at Singularity, was the growth of ego. I think as people became involved, as people left, often it was because of that feeling, and so I can only imagine as a leader coming in, especially in those moments of having to make really, really hard decisions, that ego place was it's not that it wasn't apparent, because 'cause I'm sure it was there, but, it's the sifting through it because some of those people that had the biggest egos also contributed a lot.
I mean,
Therein lies some of the challenge.
100%. And you read books and things about leadership, and especially in the tech industry, there's talk about like, oh, you've got 10x engineers and rock stars. And sometimes you just have to put up with the divas because of the output and things. And sometimes that's true. But like in my experience, one, it starts at the top. And so the culture is going to be set by the leader and by the leadership. Um,
Mhm.
I would actually say that historically, like Rob, who was the CEO for a long time, I think Rob is an incredible guy, and I think he was humble and he was kind and empathetic and had a vision. I think that the challenge was the people that he brought around him
Yeah.
all the time weren't the same way necessarily, and so that think about the pyramid and the org chart. It's like
Yeah.
if the person at the top is insulated by a layer of not good stuff, then that's what's going to go down, right? And so what's been critical for me is two things. One is being visible and present myself with the whole company to set the tone. And secondly, the people that I put around me as a leadership team have to echo and embody the same qualities,
Mhm.
right? And they do, right? I always say like we should take our work seriously, but not ourselves seriously.
Mm. Do you think anything was lost in taking that deep ego out?
I I do. I mean, there's no choice that isn't without its trade-offs. Like, I think there's places where we're probably a little softer than, there's places where maybe we lost a little bit of killer instinct, whether it
Mm.
comes on like on sales or on performance or different things. And, and I come from the world of finance and Wall Street where it's like it was nothing but killer instinct. And
Yeah.
so there are times where sometimes I want to shake people and be like, you know, pick it up. But I'll tell you what, I think the results speak for themselves still. Like
Yeah.
maybe there's things that we've lost, but guess what? We're also profitable for the first time. Our employee engagement and happiness scores are like higher than they've ever been by far. And I think, okay, if that's the reward of losing a little bit of losing a bunch of ego and maybe a little bit of drive and talent, like I'll take that trade all day long.
So what's next? Where do you go from here?
Well, that's what we're working on now. So, we have now coming up on 2 years of successfully executing a pretty simple plan, which was run our world-class executive programs, work with our repeat clients and grow our client base of, when I say clients, the big companies that we are building custom learning programs for their teams. And we've been doing a good job of that now for 2 years. And so the question is, where is the next place, price wise, audience wise, geographically, topic wise, where we can do a great job of serving people, building a product that is really fun to execute and interesting and profitable and furthers our mission.
Mhm.
And I can tell you where our head at is right now, where our head is at right now is, we have this amazing executive program that teaches leaders for a week about exponential technologies and impact and innovation. But it's meant for CEOs and leaders, and it costs, $16,000 for a week. So that's an aspirational kind of high barrier to entry program.
Yep.
And there's a whole world out there of people that will benefit from what we have to offer. And so I think the next place we're going to build is, what does that next level program look like for emerging leaders that is more accessible from a price standpoint? It might look like a 2 or 3 day program. It might look like not being hosted in Silicon Valley where you have to travel to California. Maybe it looks like doing one in Europe, one in South America. But I think there's a whole world of people that we have yet to reach with what we have to teach and offer. And I'm excited about getting to all those people.
I'm excited for you. I love what Singularity does. I am incredibly grateful to you for the work you've done in helping this company to stay afloat, because I think the world needs what Singularity is doing. I think it's an important mission. When we look at the roster of talent that you have access to, the team that you kept, what I know, and probably what some of our listeners may not be aware of, is that you still have access to some of the biggest thinkers in the world globally. Those individuals, I know how committed they are to the work that you're doing. And there's no other organization out there that has created the network of access and impact that Singularity has. And that's really a testament to all who came before you, but also to what you have been able to rescue in some ways. I mean, not that it was a rescue mission, but in reality, you found yourself in a place where,
It was a
it
little bit
was a
of a
crisis.
recognition.
Yeah, it was a crisis. You had to find your way through it. And,
Yeah.
2 years into that, you are navigating it and you're finding your way through. And I think what I'm most excited for is to see Singularity get back to a place where it is taking some of those incredible risks that it took back in the day that had us all looking at our world differently. Because that, I think, is one of the things that is most eye-opening for anyone who has ever gone to a Singularity event. It is like no other, and there is something really powerful to step into a world where the future is now, and that's what Singularity does. It brings us to that. And an executive program, I know you're doing that within that, and so the fact that you're looking at how can you make that more accessible, that's a risk, but at the same time, a necessary one for growth. As we wrap up, I know we've gone a little bit over than what we had planned, but this has been such an incredible conversation. What would you like to leave our listeners with as look back on these past few years of leading this company, of focusing on culture, on the lessons that you've learned? What would you like to leave us with?
Oh man. Well, there's the part of me that wants to leave you with the Singularity message about, optimism and, technology is inevitable, but what we choose to do with it is not. And so it's up to all of us to build a better future with the choices that we make. But the other thing I want to leave with is that's more sort of about the conversation we've had about teams and about culture and building organizations is like, I just think more people should care. Or how do I say this better? I think everyone should watch Ted Lasso because I think he's a great example of a leader that builds a culture by making it cool to care about your teammates, care about people, care about the work that you do every day, and not be too cool to wear your heart on your sleeve and be kind and care. And the new Superman movie that just came out has kind of the same message.
Mm.
So I'll leave you with, with Superman's quote from last week is, I think maybe kindness is the real punk rock.
I love that. I love that. Kindness is the real punk rock. Well, and in a world that right now kindness is something that we all desire and yet see so little of, I think that message is so incredibly important.
Yeah.
Aaron, where can our listeners stay in touch with you?
Come find us at su.org. Come apply to a program, visit a summit somewhere in the world. And if you want to follow me, I'm at Aaron.Vaccaro on Instagram. And I don't do much, but occasionally I get to go on a podcast like this and then share some insights and, get to benefit from what you're doing.
Well, I think you're very humble. The work you're doing is incredible, and you've really shown us that as a leader, you can have heart and you can have vision, and that is not mutually exclusive. And
Oh
that's an
man.
important message.
How about I'll leave you with this. Maybe my favorite moment from the last 2 years. That was like the biggest validation and most inspirational was I was at an executive program a couple years ago, and I tried to go to each one and get to know the participants and everything. And I had a guy at the end of the week who I talked to a number of times, and he'd been a fan of Singularity for a long time. At the end of the week, he came up and he said, I just want to tell you something. I've always known that there was a lot of great heads at Singularity and at the top. It's like, but now I know that there's a heart at the top as well.
Beautiful.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, you're going to make me cry. So thank
That's
you, Andrea.
powerful.
This is really
That is
fun. Thanks
powerful.
for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you next time. What Aaron reminded us today is that when you're rebuilding a company, sure, you need to fix what's broken. But actually, what's more important is it's about choosing intentionally and courageously what you take forward. And that begins with people. One of the most powerful things I heard Aaron share was his decision to build Singularity's new leadership team from within, not from hires from the outside, but squarely from the middle. These were individuals who'd been doing the work all along, quietly, consistently, and sometimes even invisibly. That choice wasn't easy. It carried a whole lot of risk, but it also sent a message to those remaining within the organization. We see you, we trust you, and we're building this together. I took away from this conversation that vision isn't optional, because without a shared direction, even the most brilliant teams pull against each other. Trust begins at the top. Aaron's choice to rebuild his leadership team from the inside out and lead with heart, that really made the difference in everything they did from that point forward. Crisis can be a turning point. I mean, what we heard Aaron say is that what brought Singularity to the brink of an ending became its very catalyst to become what it was always meant to be, to step back into that purpose-driven work that galvanized the team who continued within the organization, and even those who had been let go, but who still believed in what it was that Singularity stood for. Clarity breeds resilience. Once the team decided collectively who they were, what they stood for, and what they weren't, that was when they got momentum. And I think the thing that really stood out for me was Aaron's ability to create culture. Because what he showed us is that culture is built in the hard moments. Kindness becomes a practice for those in leadership positions, so that rebuilding is grounded in collective care. What a beautiful message. If you find yourself leading through uncertainty or maybe holding the weight of what could come next, Aaron reminds us all, you don't have to have all the answers, but you do need to have clarity, courage, and care. And this is really the foundation of culture. And when you start there, the rest follows. If this conversation resonated with you, why not share it with somebody who's navigating change? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Sense-Making Conversations on whatever platform you're listening from. I hope this helps you lead with heart, clarity, and purpose. I'm Andrea Sampson, and this has been Sense-Making Conversations.